Ladies and gentlemen, greetings. I'm Robbie.
And I'm Jason, and welcome to the table.
Jason, Bards of the Board, episode 1. We're here.
Yep, we finally made it. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of exciting for sure. We definitely want to welcome those who are listening in. This is our inaugural episode. Excited about this. Excited that Robbie can join me in this journey. It's a little dream of mine. So we're gonna have some fun with it. We thank you for listening. We hope you keep on tuning in for future ones.
Absolutely. This is a passion. I have loved board games for a long time, and I like in my circle, I've always been the board game guy. And then I went up to Lynchburg one trip and got to – Jason and I had talked board games in the past, and then I finally got to go see his house and experience board games with Jason. And Jason has raised a family of board gamers. Like, his children know more board games than most of you who may be listening to this podcast right off the bat.
This is true. Like, as a longtime gamer, I wanted my kids to game for sure. They play video games a lot as well because we're a video game family, but I wanted to make sure we were a board game family. And to this day, they're pretty good. Most of them are still pretty heavy in board games, as you've seen, because you played with every single kid at least once now, but some of them multiple times.
Absolutely. So we wanted to start off by introducing, if you're discovering this podcast for the first time, we wanted to introduce you to us. And as this is a board game podcast, we wanted to kind of start with the idea of kind of how we got into board games and things of that nature. And then afterwards, we definitely want to talk about sort of the goal of the podcast. What should you expect when you're listening to this? Kind of when you join us at the table. So for me personally, we grew up playing board games as a family, but we grew up playing the traditional games. We grew up playing the Saris, the Monopolies. I vividly remember we have this Star Wars Episode 1 version of Monopoly that has these like raised pieces that clip onto the sides of the board, and you slide the properties into the like raised edges. And so it's supposed to like mimic the bridges at the big fight at the end. And so you have these, and so when you land on that space, the property is just right there. And so you can like slide it out, has really cool pieces, things like that. So we grew up playing a lot of that. We also grew up as a Spades family, played a lot of card games as a family. And so that was – I kind of like always that gathering around the table, enjoying it. It was, okay, mom would cook dinner, one of the kids would do the dishes, and then when we were done, everyone would gather around the table. What game were we playing that night? Kind of a deal. I grew up, and then when I hit middle school, I started playing like competitive trading card games, went to a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments at the time. And then when I got to college, I'd always said I was a board gamer, and a friend one day kind of pulled me aside and was like, hey, let me tell you about this game. It's called Settlers of Catan. And I was like, ooh, okay. That's kind of spicy. I dig it. And it opened up a world of games that we basically, a lot of us had really terrible jobs when we were freshmen in college, but we were using our money every single time we had like at least $50 sitting around. It was, okay, what game are we getting now? And so we had every expansion of Dominion. I remember playing Small World for the first time and being like, wow, it's World of Warcraft in a board game. Like, this is so fun. So it kind of fueled it. And then as I have continued into adulthood, I now have grown my collection. And I am, once again, nowhere near Jason. But we're over 70 games strong. Did a little count before we got here. So, yeah. How about you, Jason? How'd you get into this?
We have, unsurprisingly, as with many board gamers, we have similar kind of backstories. I grew up playing some of the games like Sorry and Monopoly and Scrabble. We didn't play as much as a family, so it was more at my grandparents' house because they had a few, and I had a few cousins that we would spend the summers at my grandmother's house, so we'd play. But I was definitely not a gamer at that time. And then when I got to high school, I discovered Rook, because that was what we played on our church trips. And so I learned how to play Rook because most of the adult helpers were playing Rook. And so I would learn how to play, and that was like my moment of glory was when I was a 10th grader. I was allowed to play with the adults because I was good enough to actually hang with the adults, and I was always very stressed hanging with adults. But it made you a better player because you were so focused on how Rook is. And Rook, for those who don't know, is a trick-taking game, very similar to Spades, in which there's 4 suits. You have to follow suit and different rules within that to how to win the game. And so I played a lot of Rook is what I played through high school. Still not any other kind of gamer. And then discovered Phase 10, another card game that I played the daylights out of. Elizabeth and I, when we first started dating, played a ton of Phase 10. And that's why I knew another reason why, one of the many reasons why I fell in love with my wife is because she was a gamer and she was ruthless. And then, so stepping back a little bit, in college, I found Spades because I had friends who played Spades, which was very similar to Rook. And so we played Spades a ton with some of my high school friends who had gone on to college at University of Alabama. Roll Tide. And we played so much that we always went nil, right? We literally changed the name of the game to Going Nil because we just wanted to go nil. We played so many games of Spades just to see if we could go nil. And then when Elizabeth, again, going back to Elizabeth and I started dating, when I realized she could play Spades pretty well, it was the same way. And then we played Phase 10. She was ruthless and relentless on me and kicking my butt. So I was kind of a gamer in that way. I never got into the collectible card games, the trading card games, any of those. No specific reason. They were just never really introduced to me because I'm a few years older than you. So that's a little younger than me than when that really hit. At least I wasn't a gamer at that time. And then fast forward a little bit, this is 2000. I can remember exactly when it is. Ryder was turning 2. So it was, 17 years ago. We were living in Colorado Springs at the time, and we were going out to Disneyland to run a Disneyland half marathon. Stopped in Las Vegas because I had a good friend, Joey Gasson, one of my college friends who I played Spades with. We stopped and stayed with him, and he introduced me to a game called Settlers of Catan and Ticket to Ride. And he even said, which is funny, right? Like that is the gateway game. Whatever our personal opinions that will come out about Settlers over these episodes, we cannot deny that's one of the games that brought me into where I am now. But we played Ticket to Ride, and I remember Joey saying, "You're not really going to understand this, but the moment we're done, you're going to want to play it again." And sure enough, as soon as we finished that game, I was like, "I got to play again." And we were hooked. Like Elizabeth and I bought Ticket to Ride and Settlers almost immediately, and then eventually went Carcassonne, the big 3 of the gateway games. And for a while, those were the main games we had. We eventually got Dominion, but we didn't expand much beyond that. The internet wasn't as big then, right? And we didn't really have a lot of game stores then. And then we went overseas shortly after that, went to Virginia for a few years. Then we were in Germany. And unfortunately, I wasn't a hardcore gamer or an expansive gamer while I was there. Otherwise, I could have gone to Essen Spiel, which would have been like a dream, right? To go to the biggest game convention in the world. So we were still gaming, but it was just doing a lot of Settlers, a lot of Ticket to Ride. By then we'd expanded to Ticket to Ride Europe and Ticket to Ride Maryland, which isn't even in production anymore. And some of those other games, Seafarers of Catan, right? So we'd expanded upon those. And then we moved back to America, 2013, and Elizabeth's brother, Christopher and Mandy, and he was kind of a gamer. And their first Christmas we were home, they gave us, King of Tokyo. And it basically just opens us back up to the hobby tabletop world, and then it just kind of went wide open from there. And then of course Will Wheaton's tabletop, which shaped so many board gamers to this day. We pretty much almost every game he played that we liked, we bought. And when we'd buy it, we would have watched the episode. Oh, we liked that game. We'd buy that game, then watch an episode of it before we played it to learn how to play it, and then play the game. I remember, we would reference back to that episode and how it brought us into gaming. So that's when we got Small World. That's when we got Kingdom Builder. That's when we got Pandemic. So many of those games they played on tabletop led us to be the gamers we are now. And then COVID hit, and I kind of went off the deep end, right? Because I was inside all the time. And that's when Elizabeth would say, like, we went from having maybe 60 or 70 games to well over 300 games. Now, if you include my expansions, it's probably close to 400 and something things to include expansions and all that. But we have over 300 games right now. So that's kind of the very quick, long history of how we've got to where I am now. So yeah, it's my friend Joey Gasson, who I love to death and introduced me to it, Christopher and Mandy, and then Will Wheaton. That's the trifecta of folks who really made me the gamer I am today.
Yeah, it is. Two of my friends, we have Daniel Brasher and Zach Meldon. We were the trio going around with another friend, Caleb, who kind of got into it and joined us for all of it. And then I always forget, like, my oldest brother was 2 years ahead of me. And so whenever we met up, he would always introduce me to a new board game, and he would always introduce me to new YouTube videos. Like, those were what's the hot thing you're learning at your school so we can catch up. And John was the one who, like, I never played a cooperative game where it's not you're beating the other players of the board, you are trying to beat the board. And John introduced me to the Forbidden Islands. Then he was like, oh, this may feel a little easy, but don't worry. We got Forbidden Desert next, and it was like, okay,
waters rise. Yep. So
it was super. There's just so much to it, and for those of you listening, so one of the ways Jason and I got connected was through disc golf, or frisbee golf. For those of you who are just finding this as a board game podcast. And one thing that I really love about disc golf is there are thousands upon thousands of discs that are out there. And so when you're helping players get into the game, you can find a disc that works for them. This frisbee isn't working. Okay, how about this one? And there's options. And I think what's always drawn me to hobby gaming as well is it's the same feel. Like, there's such a joy of bringing someone to the table and watching their eyes light up when they have that exact moment that you were describing, Jason, of like,
yep.
But can we play again?
Right. For sure. Absolutely. We went through phases where we were still that person, even though we were a gamer. And Dominion, I still remember we had, when we lived in Florida, one of our neighbors, we were blessed in that probably our best friends in Florida moved off base on base and became our next door neighbors. And so our kids gamed together like every single day. They loved Munchkin and Escape the game with the soundtrack going. So they would play a ton of that. They would play a ton of Dominion. But they introduced us to Seven Wonders. And they're like, it's a 18-card game. It's 30 minutes. As soon as you're done, and like, absolutely, let's play it again. And so I was still that person at that time, just, consuming those things. And now, like, you're dead on. Like, you mentioned John doing that for you. Well, I still, for a while, did that for my older brother. And that when I remember a couple years ago, he had just retired from being a firefighter, and we went home and we took Quacks to Quedlinburg, a game we'll eventually cover here, but I showed you, and lots of people I've showed to have loved that game because it's such a great game. But I took Quacks and we played it, and he loved it. He's like, I need to buy that, and I just happened to have a retirement gift. I was like, well, good, because here you go, because I'd actually brought hoping and knowing that he would like Quacks, but he loved it so much. I'm like, and I said, well, happy retirement, So here's that kind of joy definitely, it makes me happy. I mean, I'm selfish because I get to play games, and by default, I'm the one who has to do all the teaching in our house and our game group anyway, and so it makes it easier. And then since we've been here, Brad and Kimberly, some of our friends and coworkers, they're new into the gaming. Nate McMurray's new into the gaming. I enjoy getting to be that person to show them those kind of games, which kind of led into what became the genesis of this podcast, really, right? Bringing newer players into it. As Robbie can attest with his visits up here, because he comes up here a couple of times a year for disc golf related things and stays at the house, and we'll play a game at night or two games at night, and then literally talk about board games for an hour and a half. I'm like, Robbie, if I'm talking too much, you can tell me to shut up and go to bed, right? But because my wife will talk to me, but I've talked her out about board games, right? But to have a friend and a compatriot, a peer who loves board games as much as I do to talk about, and then just realize, like, we love this so much. And we love to spread the joy, right? We love to spread the love and not necessarily make other folks as deep into the game as we are, as gaming as we are, but at least open them up to what it could be. Because they know, like, there's nothing wrong with really loving Spades, really loving Monopoly or Sorry or whatever those games that you may play. Those are great that you love those, but there's this whole other world that can just kind of bring new things to it, new thematic things, because whether you're going deep into the thematics of a game or deep into the mechanics of a game to push your luck, like Quacks of Quedlinburg, I love bringing that kind of thing and opening their eyes and their mind into those kinds of games. And there's so many different games that are out there. So when I started, I knew that I thought a while about doing some sort of board game content just because I love board games, right? But I'm not necessarily funny or innovative or creative, but I can talk about games all day long. And then just through the natural genesis or the nexus of getting to know Robbie already has another kind of content creation world out there on the disc golf side of the house. It just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, this is the time, right? And this is the place. And this is the way. And so when I brought it to him, what I was thinking, and it really kind of modeled after what you do for disc golf, helping beginners come into it. It just made total sense between all those nights we talk about board games. Being able to talk about whatever it's a really heavy game and highlighting some of the aspects of that game that can be intriguing for newer players, maybe not a brand new player, but someone like Brad or Kimberly or other folks who are just new, or some of the lighter games that we know may seem complicated, like Quacks of Quedlinburg, but a non-gamer could pick that up pretty well. Within a few rounds of Quacks and Quedlinburg, you get the game and you get the fun of the push your luck. And so that's kind of the idea of the game. Do you kind of agree with that, Robbie? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. And because part of the passion, right, is new players come in, and you mentioned it already, like, there's a bonding experience that I think new gamers may miss out on of, like, tabletop, like you mentioned. Like, there was a trust in what Will Wheaton was saying of, okay, he's bringing these people on, we're watching them enjoy the game, have fun with the game, and now I want to go play that game. Like, I remember the first time that I played Sheriffs of Nottingham, when, like, watching Will and them play it, and I was like, wow, that's so fun. Everybody's leaning into the theme. They're having a blast. And I invited friends over to my house because I'm sure you'll see as we start posting on social media, and you can follow us at Bards of the Board on all social media channels. But, like, I'm sure we'll share our setups that we have at home. Like, I feel like that's a vital piece of people can picture us around the tables, and they'll see our tables. But I invited friends over to come play, and I was like, this is going to be amazing. We're going to do what they did. And it flopped on our table. And so it was like, oh no, like that's not it. And so I think our goal and our dream is to be I've never thought about that game before. Oh, I've never heard of that game before. And we can almost become like a shopping list for you. Or if you're, like, for us, the local library here in Birmingham has board games to check out, and your local library may have board games for you to check out. So then you're like, it can be overwhelming seeing all those options. And what we want to do is each episode, Jason and I, when I come up to visit Jason, is I just enjoy Jason as a human being. And so because of that, I am, like, catching up with him. I love catching up with Elizabeth and his family, and, like, it's a great experience. But then also, we're talking about games and whatnot. So we're going to catch up with each other because we text throughout the week, but most of that's disc golf related. So now we get the chance. We're going to catch up. We're going to talk about games that we've been playing, so you guys can get insight, because it takes time for a podcast to develop, for episodes to come out. So we want you guys to be able to hear about games, and, oh, it's curious that maybe Jason and Elizabeth have been playing that one a little more recently, or Robbie and Lindsay have been, they're playing that. Every time they have friends over, they seem to talk about playing this game. So we want to have that time to catch up. But then the highlight of each episode is going to be a game. And we're going to play the game and talk about the game and discuss it before bringing it on the podcast. And then we have a system or a scale that we've come up with. And I think the scale's kind of fun, Jason. I'll tell you here in episode 1, it contextually comes from coming to hang out with Jason, and I notice Jason has a suite when he's playing, and I'm visiting him. I'm trying to be a good guest, and I notice Jason is chowing down on these delicious looking double doozy cookies. And if you don't know what a double doozy is, it's 2 cookies with icing between them. And I'm watching Jason chow down on this cookie, and I'm like, man, that looks incredible. But I want to be rude and ask and be like, can I have one of your special cookies, Jason? And I'm sure you would have been like, absolutely, right off the bat. Yep. But, trying to be a good guest here. Yep. And so the next visit, there's more of those cookies, and his daughter all of his kids were in the house. And so I asked Hannah, I was like, hey, do you think your dad would mind if I had one of those cookies? She was like, no, absolutely not, especially the sprinkled ones. Like, he doesn't like the ones with sprinkles. And I was like, all right, cool. So there's just this, when I think of board gaming with the Collins, I go to Double Doozies sitting in the basement. And so our scale is a cookie scale. So instead of like a out of 10 or out of A, B, C, D, F, our scale is a cookie scale that correlates to those numbers. And so, Jason, I don't know if you have it pulled up. Do you want to walk them through our scale?
Yep, I have it pulled up. So it is going to be like a 5-point scale. And it's going to be A, B, C, D, F relational when you think about that as an American and the way we do scores for at least our schooling. So Robbie already mentioned what the A is. I'll go top to bottom. Well, actually, I'll go bottom to top.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll do bottom top. We've already talked about the top, Double Doozy, so we'll come back to that one. So the bottom one, and the bottom one doesn't mean it's terrible, because as we do these ratings, we're like, here's what may be bad about it, but there may be something good about it. And so the bottom one's an oatmeal raisin, because a lot of people out there love oatmeal raisin cookies. That's why I say the game may not be terrible, but for how we evaluate that and look at that game, it's an oatmeal raisin cookie. If you like oatmeal, you like raisins, you may like that. It's not really for us, or it may not be for a newer player. The next level up is a sugar. Lots of people like sugar cookies. I like sugar cookies sometimes, but I like more flavor to it most of the time. Mm-hmm. And so that's why the next level up is peanut butter. Now, the peanut butter is interesting because, side note, when I started asking my family members what would be their worst cookie, often it came up to a peanut butter. Like Mandy, Christopher's wife, our sister-in-law, who play games with all the time, hers like, oh, I hate peanut butter cookie. I'm like, I actually kind of like peanut butter cookies. So it was an interesting discussion in my household what those cookies would be, and my kids in general, especially the boys, like peanut butter cookies. So a peanut butter cookie is kind of like C rating, right in the middle, not terrible, not great, could meet a lot of needs there, right? Because a lot of people like peanut butter cookie. The next rating up is a B, which is a chocolate chip. I mean, come on, it's the OG. Not everybody likes chocolate chip, but I love the chocolate chip. Elizabeth, for our live stream, so we did a live stream this weekend for Disc Golf Worlds. Elizabeth always makes these really great cookies, and the guys loved them, and they were gone very, very fast. Like, I looked over, she made some white chocolate ones and some regular chocolate chip ones. The chocolate chip ones were gone like literally within a few minutes after they got done eating pizza. So everybody loves a chocolate chip cookie. It is fantastic. And same way, good warm chocolate chip cookie, you just can't beat it. And of course, the best cookie on the face of the planet is a Double Doozy cookie. I love them so much. It's too bad. Like, here's a funny story about Double Doozies. We lived in Germany for 3 years, and I came home on a trip, one of my first trips home without the kids, and it was a 2-week training. I had to go to Dayton, Ohio. But I literally went to Great American Cookie Company and bought 12 Double Doozies just to take on the plane to take home. I kid you not, went to the airport that day, put them in a box. I even bought like a little Rubbermaid tin to do my carry-on, so I had those cookies with me. So I took home 12 Double Doozies to Germany, because there is no Great American Cookie Company in Germany. Lots of great treats, lots of great sweets in Germany. Trust me, we love that. They didn't have Double Doozy cookies there. So anyway, so the Double Doozy is the cream of the crop, the top, the best. You just can't go wrong with that. So that's kind of our rating scale, and I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure when we land on things and we're rating these games, it'll come down to, like, for instance, like an oatmeal raisin. I think why it's beautiful is at the end of the day, it's a cookie. So it's going to be good, and some people are going to love it. And some people, though, like, are going to see an oatmeal raisin cookie, and they're just going to be like, you know what? I'd rather not – if that's my only option, I'd rather not have a cookie today. And I think that will perfectly describe some games that we play. Like, if that's the only game I have to play today, you know what? We may watch Ahsoka. So it just depends on what we're covering. And so – I think what also is really fun about this is we're going to talk a lot of board games. But if you haven't gathered, Jason and I, we geek out. We're both video gamers. We have a lot of things that we enjoy in the geek or nerd space. And so there's going to be times where we're like, hey, like I just brought up Ahsoka. I know Jason, big Star Wars family. So like I know they're watching it. We're not going to throw spoilers out and everything, but it's a great opportunity, hopefully, if you find yourself without a lot of friends, to scratch that board game or that geek or that nerd itch. Our goal is to kind of be the people that you kind of gather around the table. That's the vibe. We open with welcome to the table, because we want this to feel like you're sitting here with us at our table in the basement, hanging out, talking board games. And hopefully we'll also spin this off making a YouTube channel so that we have like playthroughs, some guests of, hey, like we mentioned Brad and Kimberly who are up there. And every time I'm up there, we have a night where Brad and Kimberly come over and we play a game with them. And it's almost always been introductory. Hey, here's a new game, things like that. And so like the last time they came, we did Tickets to Ride, I think is what we ended up playing.
Yep. This is the first time they had played some heavier games. They had already taught them Wingspan, and they're deep in Wingspan, but they had never played Ticket to Ride. He has never played Settlers of Catan. So guess what I'm going to be teaching them soon? Settlers. Because you have to play it at least once to understand the lore about it and why so much of it is good, even though you and I don't play it anymore, though we'd happily play it with a friend. So if they really want to play it. So we were just talking about that today. And so, yeah, we will be playing that sometime soon. On one of their next trips, on one of their next visits over here, we'll play Settlers because it can be a shorter game if you play fast. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, and go ahead.
No, you got it, boss.
And kind of piggybacking off what Robbie said, in speaking of Brad, I'm just kind of taking that a little further. Like one of my goals for it is to even part of that guest is play that game with them and then bring them on and have them give feedback on, as a newer gamer, what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it. So you're not just hearing us giving our perspective as seasoned gamers. I think we can we have good discernment on folks we play with and good discernment on the games. I think we'll have a good idea about what can and can't work based on the people we're playing with. But I'd love to hear their feedback as well. We had a mutual friend over here and his wife a couple weeks ago, Dakota, and they've played enough games to get games, and so they got it really fast, but they're still not really gamers. And so that's the kind of person I'd love to have, or even a brand new gamer who's never gamed, and someone who we know, and show them the game and have them on so that when we talk about our main game, have just a few minutes of them in there kind of giving their feedback as well. Because it's good to hear that non-gamer or newer gamer as we go into like a heavy game, or even if it's Brad, if we go really deep into like a longer, heavier game like Terraforming Mars or Agricola, how they think about something that's a game that's 2 to 3 hours versus an hour-long Wingspan. So that's kind of one of the visions for one of my hopes for that is to have other folks on to be discussing these games with us. Maybe not every episode, but from time to time. And we have a plethora of people up here for sure. I know I do. And in your side of the world, we'll have a plethora of people to do the same. So,
yeah. And I love that topic of introducing someone to a game, an experienced gamer trying to pick up the game. For lots of you, when you make the jump into hobby gaming, if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I've heard about these, but like they look like there's novels for the instruction manual. How am I ever supposed to try to figure this out? That's something that, like Jason said, there's seasoned gamers who can kind of pick pieces up. Like when I go up and visit Jason and it's me, Jason, and Elizabeth playing a game, there's instruction, but I also have played enough games to be able to ask specific questions of like, okay, what do I need to be like? A great example is I always ask, what is a winning score? Because I can kind of, as an experienced gamer, formulate what is going to start building points and what paths I can see kind of forming as Jason explains the rules. Whereas if you're new to the hobby gaming experience, you're probably just like that initial wall hits you. I know that exists for my mother-in-law as a great example. I've introduced them to a couple of games, and I know it has to, the gateway to get them playing has to be very simple, or else it's going to be too overwhelming and they're just going to bow out and never give the game a chance. So, like, for instance, we took 2 games this weekend, and another thing that we mentioned, we're going to do this at the beginning of the episode, so we kind of wanted to move from here, if you're good with it, Jason, to kind of give, like, a small vibe. We aren't going to do a rating today or dive into a game, but give you the other elements of, hey, we're going to provide a game that we recommend and talk about some games we've been playing lately, if that works for you.
Yep. Yeah, let's do it. So I will go first on this if that's okay. And we're going to, today we're kind of, from week to week, episode to episode, it may be games, it may be other things we're doing. Mine will almost always be games because I'm lucky enough that I have a good atmosphere here, and Elizabeth tolerates me pretty well to play games with me. We haven't played for a few days, but we've been going through a lot of games lately. And so that's good. And so one of those games we played, and we've actually played with you that I want to highlight today, is Silver and Gold. So I even have a little show and tell. So Silver and Gold is a flip and write game. And the gist of a flip and write game is that Everyone has cards in front of them. Let's step back. It's just a flip and right or a roll and right game. If you roll dice, numbers come out. You do some of those numbers on your own track, on your own card, on your own board, different types of games. Silver and Gold is similar to that, and that's a flip and right, that you're flipping over cards that have Tetris, polyomino shapes that you're making on cards in front of you. And as you fill those cards up, it'll score points based on how you fill those cards up, and that gets you more cards to fill up more cards. And so that's the ultimate goal of the game, is to fill up as many of those cards as you can. And there's other little goals while you're doing that, based on the number of palm trees. Once you cover it, if you get a coin, the first person to get 4 coins 3 times, there's different trophies to get. I played that with Dakota and Marissa, and we played that with you when you were here. And I forget how much I love Silver and Gold, because when we played with you, we hadn't played in a long time. And as soon as we played, I'm like, oh my gosh, this game is fantastic. It's so quick. It's so easy. It's easy to explain. I had to quickly go through the rules, but within 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, I got all this again. And then I'd already forgotten by the time we played with Dakota, but then I pulled it out really quick, and it was fast. And it's a game that, one of the reasons we like it is because it's easy to play. Literally, you flip it over, you have a shape, a Lego shape of a 1x3, and you just have to fill that in somewhere on your card. That's it. That's the whole gameplay. And then if you cover something up, you may get to do something else. If you cover up a red X, you automatically get to fill in another spot on the board on one of your 2 cards, because you always have 2 cards you're filling out. If you cover up a palm trees, you count how many palm trees are in the common row of cards you pull out. So the gameplay is very easy. It's a 4-round game. 7 cards get turned over. So there's only 28 cards in the entire game get turned over, and they're turned over. Everybody done? Okay, turn over. Everybody done. And then it's pretty quick. But what we like about it is you can also still, you're not so focused on what you're doing, you're ignoring everybody else. You can still chat and talk and laugh. Some games we'll talk about become what we call multiplayer solitaire, where you're so focused on your individual board, you kind of are not having that communalness that way you're just hanging out and talking, and you're focused on your game, like Calico, which we'll talk about eventually one day, right? You know that one well. Like you forget anybody's around you when you're playing that one. But Silver and Gold, you can look at each other's board, you can kind of laugh. Oh, I just got a coin. Who got a coin? All right, I get a trophy, right? So that's one of the reasons we really love Silver and Gold. The ease of play. I'm really surprised it's not an app yet. Like I've looked, like it's not super intricate. So surely they have an app development for this. They have apps for other games that are flip and right games that I love, like Cartographers and they're blank Explorers. A couple of same designer, Phil Walker Harding did Explorers. Another one we haven't shown you yet. So it's a great game. It's highly recommended. It's an easy game to play, easy game to grok. That Silver and Gold is one of the games we've been playing lately. What have you been playing, Robbie?
Yeah. So when I was up there last time, Jason introduced me to Machi Koro. And Machi Koro is a dice rolling free market game is the best way I can describe it. So there are several games in the board game group where there is a collection of a shared market that you gather resources, and then you can head to the market to purchase items and things like that. And so in Machi Koro, you're building a city, and your city has different buildings, and those buildings are all correlated to a dice number. And so those can be anywhere from 1 to 12. And as you roll the die, based on the type of buildings you get, sometimes certain buildings, if anyone rolls the number associated with that building, we'll say like a farm has a 1 or a 2. If anyone rolls a 1 or a 2, then your farm pays you money. And then there are other ones that are, if you roll that dice, you get more coins. And then the really mean ones, and I'm kind of, if I can ever poke at other players around me, I'm always that guy. I like to be poking. So the cafes or the restaurants are all, if someone else rolls that number, then they pay you during your turn. And so it's really, really fun. It plays really, really fast. And I agree with Jason. We played it this past Saturday. I went and hung out with my in-laws. And so while we were there, it was college football was on. Everyone was watching it. And we had Machi Koro going, and half the people had never played it before. And yet we were still able to enjoy the game. Yep. It moves pretty fast, very, very simple. But it has literally stayed on our coffee table since, because I ordered it before I even left Jason's house. And so I had it waiting for me when I got home, and it stays on our table. And if it's like we at this point, Lindsay and I are so good at it, we can probably get a whole game of Machi Koro going during just commercials of like an hour-long Hulu show or something like that. So super fun. We've really enjoyed Machi Koro. And there's like a bunch of expansions too for different buildings.
Yeah, there are 2 or 3 expansions, and there's a meaner version called Machi Koro Bright Lights Big City that actually has more take that kind of stuff, where literally if you roll it, you can take half of everybody's money. Or if you roll it and like, oh my gosh, I have to give up half of my money. It's rough, but it's also like you can have massive rolls where, oh, I got 50 coins and I just won the game, right? We don't play it as much anymore because it's so rough. Like, and we had that when the kids were a little younger, and we played it, and it's tough when you have younger kids and you're just not, because you're not really the good thing is you're not really attacking them because the die roll do it, so they can't blame me, but they can blame me for buying the card that they now. And so that's what I don't play as much Machi Koro anymore, but we played a ton of it. So it was one of those games that we had when we got it. We played and played and played, and there's even a legacy version of it, which it basically is legacy is you play through and you change the cards and you change the board as you go. Fantastic.
Ooh.
We love it. It's actually really good. It's enough of Machi Koro that you get it, and it just adds cards as you go, and you can choose as things happen. You can choose whether you want a card to be a red card, a bad card, or a take that card, or a green or blue card where it's a good card. And like Ryder always chose the red. And if I ever had an opportunity, I always chose the good ones, and they always chose the bad ones. And the best thing about that, we played it as a family. I think 4 of us. I think we played as when Xander's freshman year in college. And we played through it, and this is the shortened version of it. Literally on the very last roll of the entire game, the 12th game or the 10th game, Hannah had to roll a double 6 to win. Otherwise, Ryder was going to win. And she rolled a double 6. It's like a nat 20, right? It was amazing. Yeah. Like we all
Hands
screamed and yelled, and she literally had one of the hardest rolls to do, and she had to do it. And it rolled 2 6s, and it was just wild. And it was fantastic. Ryder lost, but he was happy to lose that one because it's such a unique thing. But Machi Koro Legacy, definitely fun. And they released Machi Koro 2, which I think has a little less of the take that cards in it, I think, for those who may not want that. They're not really, you're not attacking somebody, but if they roll a 3 and you have the cafe, they just owe you coins. Fantastic game. Machi Koro is so good. So I will talk about another game that we've played lately that I just love. It's a heavy game, both physically and design. It's called Mosaic. So my camera doesn't quite show it, but it's basically a civilization game. And what's so great about Mosaic, A Story of Civilization by Glenn Drover, what's so great about Mosaic, there's 8 actions. You only take 8 actions. On your turn, you have 1 of 8 actions, and that's it. Maybe you get resources, maybe you buy a card, maybe you do this, maybe you do that. Technology. Basically, if you've ever played Sid Meier's Civilization, for those who are gamers, it's very based on that, those kinds of things, doing civilization. And you're putting cities out, and you're putting towns out, and you're putting armies out. And the armies aren't really attacking in the traditional sense, but that's the gist of Mosaic, is essentially a civilization game where it's a hand management because you're getting a lot of cards during the game, you're playing a lot of cards during the game, you're turning in ideas for things, you're building up your population to build a new city. It's the good thing about it is there's never a bad turn in Mosaic. Like worst case, I get 20 food, or I get 13 ideas. Then on my next turn, I get to get this new thing, or this new capability, this new whatever it may be. And we loved it. Like I knew I had wanted it for a while. I missed the original Kickstarter. I got that one on like Game Nerds or something like that. So this is the retail version. And as I read the rules, I was like, I think I'm gonna really like this game. And like within 30 minutes, I'm like, I love this game. And me, Elizabeth, and Ryder played it. All loved it. Played it again the very next day, and because it has asymmetric powers based on the leader you choose to do, and it's really cool. And so I had missed the Kickstarter, but the Kickstarter has this crazy stuff, and so I have to show you this. The camera won't quite catch it, so here's the regular game. You see how big this is. I got to show you this. Look at this. I don't know if you can see that. The Colossus edition is twice as big, still in shrink because. They're still fulfilling the expansion. And so since the expansion was still a late back and they're fulfilling it, I literally went and got it immediately because it instead of having little tokens for your armies, you actually have minis for your armies. Instead of having tokens for your cities, you have minis. It's just, this is one, if we don't play it on your next trip, it'll be one of your trips for sure. And it immediately shot to one of my top 10, without doubt. Like within halfway through the first game, like this is one of my favorite games I've ever played. It's a heavy... The gameplay is not heavy, but it's 8 different actions, which a newer player could struggle with having so many actions, right? That's a tougher thing for sure. And there's not early in the game, even for analysis paralysis folks who have a tough time making a decision, there's so many good actions, they won't slow them down because not too many things you can do are going to affect what I'm doing because there just is riches galore, and there's always something good to do in Mosaic, and we loved it, like so much so that I had to get that crazy Colossus edition.
Yeah, dude, that is wild. I think for those of you who are getting into the hobby, just walk down that aisle at Target, at a Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, like wherever they may be that you find the games, and you'll notice how large some of these boxes can get, and that can be super overwhelming. And there are some games that are in really big boxes that are actually pretty easy to play, and there are some games that are in really small boxes that are pretty tough to play. So the size of the box does not tell you how difficult the game is going to be. And I think, honestly, a great example is this other game that Lindsay and I have been playing as a favorite of y'all is Sagrada. And it is so fun. We checked it out from the library because I knew, based on the suggestion of Jason, there are certain games that I am not allowed to check out from the library based on an agreement with Jason because I have to play them with him for the first time. And so Sagrada was one we kind of snuck it in there. And now it's kind of fun because I think that Sagrada it's a game that you could base a board game night around. Absolutely. Like, you're coming over to play Sagrada tonight, and probably you could play it multiple times. Like, we're going to play it 2 or 3 times, especially if you understand the game. But I also, if you know the game, I could very easily see a world where Jason and I are sitting down there and, like, Elizabeth is late getting home from work or something, because when I come on my trips, Jason and I finish pretty early during the afternoon, and, like, oh, Elizabeth's coming, she'll be here in like 25 minutes. Honestly, I bet we can get a game of Sagrada in real fast. Like, I agree. It is super easy to play. And so the idea, I think Sagrada Familia, is that, like, am I saying that right?
Probably. Sounds right.
So you're building stained glass windows.
Yep.
Which sounds like a super pretty picture, but how would you do that? It's dice. So I know we mentioned dice in Machi Koro. We play a lot of dice games at our house simply because my wife is not someone who loves getting entrenched in strategy. So she's not the person who's going to be looking and memorizing cards like in a Wingspan and, I know I need to find these, or, if I get this combo of cards in what's the game that you've told me you're just going to slaughter me at that you've played a bunch on your app?
Probably Agricola is probably the one when we talk about cards and deep strategy, because it has occupations and improvements to do, and you get 7 each. And I know if I get the right hand, I'm like, I'm going to win. It's still a 14-round game, but I'm either going to be a close game or I'm going to smoke you, because I just know the same way with Big German Wingspan. He knows early if he's going to smoke us based on what cards he's getting out early, because he just knows those cards so well.
Yeah, so with dice games, something beautiful about it is, like, if you're someone who gets easily, like, overwhelmed, or if you lose, you're the kind of person that wants to diminish everyone else's wins. I'll go ahead and admit I'm one of those people of, like, when I'm in my worst state, in my unhealthy states, the only reason you won is because blank. Like, this happened to me and therefore I didn't win, kind of a deal. Right. And so don't be that guy around your table. No one likes it. And it's really hard if you are that person to realize you're doing it, because you're just trying to be honest with people. But dice games can be very balancing in that. So you roll these die, and then they're all different colors. And as you're stacking the colors in your stained glass window, laying them out in a certain pattern, there's a little cardboard grid that lays down on top of it, and the dice fit in. It's a very aesthetically pleasing game. But you cannot put you can't put similar colors touching each other, and you cannot put orthogonally, I think is
orthogonally adjacent. You can't have the same number or the same color.
Yeah. So That means like top to bottom, you can go diagonal.
Yeah.
But so as these die get rolled to put pieces in your window, you have to match like, oh, I need a red or a blue to go in this slot, but it can't be a red 3 or a red, like it can't be a 3 or a 6. So you have all of these, and you're pulling dice out of a bag to see which pieces you can actually build with. You're rolling them. Super intriguing. Replay value incredibly high because there's patterns that go to the windows, and so you have like a base layout that you have to match, and it's just very intriguing. Definitely one that Lindsay and I have like. Machi Koro sat to the side for the week that we had Sagrada checked out because we just played it literally every day. Super fun.
I remember when you texted me, you checked it out. I was like, oh my gosh, I keep forgetting about that game because it's actually in my shelves in the basement are so full. I have games in different places around the house, and it's in a different place, and I forgot I even had games there. So it's one that I remember texting you like geeking out like Sagrada is one of the greatest ever. Like it's a top 20 easy. It could be top 10 because it's so replayable. There's so many cards there. And then there's so many promos. Promos are easy. Like I bought a lot of the Dice Tower and Board Game Geek promo cards that have the patterns in there. And I love Sagrada. The app is really good. So I play a lot of board game apps as well. The good ones, I play them on my iPad. And Sagrada is a great one because you can play really fast, choose how many players you want in it. The problem with the apps is I never pay attention to what other players are doing, so I may lose a lot because I'm just having fun trying to get my board perfect, right? I need that purple 6 or that green 5, so I don't really pay attention to what anybody else is doing. One other thing that you mentioned, one thing that we didn't mention specifically about, so it's a drafting game, but it's a snake draft. And a snake draft is if there's 3 players and I'm the starting player, it's me, Robbie, and Elizabeth, I would draft the die to place on my board, and then Robbie would, then Elizabeth would. But then Elizabeth would draft another one, and Robbie, so it goes down and back. So snake draft is a term we use in gaming, among other things. And I realize I like games. I love games with snake draft. And that's one of my favorite things about Sagrada is because when you're that guy who gets to do 2 dice, it's just like the greatest thing. But if you're the one who has the first one, it's almost easy. It's like, okay, I get whatever I want. And then whatever's left, I get stuck with, right? So I can't really get mad at having one of 2 die choke. Because at the end, if you're the first player and you're the last one to take, you're going to have one of 2 die to choose from. So in some ways, but if you're one of the middle people, it kind of stinks because you don't really get any advantage, right? So, but if you're the first or last, if you're the first, you get the first choice and you take whatever's left. If you're the last one that's in the middle part of that snake draft, I love it. Sagrada is so good. I'm glad you guys played it, and I love it. So we haven't played in a while. We have the expansion that goes up to 6 players, which is great. And it's the funny thing about Sagrada is because of that snake draft, you have 6 players. It's easy to forget. Like, okay, I'm looking at it now. I'm passing the die back again. Because in the expansion, it gives you a little tray to hold the die. So we would put like a little Lego between the first player and the last player to remind ourselves that, okay, now I'm the end of the snake draft to remind myself, okay, now go back around. So literally we would have a little, like every game was something different we'd put between the starting player and that last person just to remind them. So they didn't have to remember, am I the last person this time? So good. I'm glad you guys are playing that. It's so fantastic. So
and
talking about,
it's very beautiful.
Go ahead. Yeah. Oh, it is. You can get the theme from that because of those die and because of the board you're putting on is like a stained glass and it's just colored enough different and it's gorgeous artwork. And the production of that is really good, right? I mean, the dual layered boards, the die, and for a not expensive game, because it's really not expensive for how good that production is. That's another reason we really love Sagrada, because everything in there is really good, high quality for a not expensive game. So speaking of games, I think, like you said earlier, for our normal podcast, we'll have a game we recommend that we talk about for the week and give our evaluation. We're going to kind of close out the podcast today giving 2 recommendations for games we would talk about to newer gamers. Robbie had said, originally suggested 1, but I'm going to do 2, and I'll do it quick because I know we're running a little long already. But the idea is these are 2 games that if someone asks me what are games I should start off with, I'm a new gamer or a non-gamer who hasn't really gamed before, and we're not talking about Brad or Dakota or the folks we know who've played. What are those games? Yeah. So I'll talk about 2 of them. I chose a party-type game and then more like a strategic game. The party game I chose is Just One. This is a game that has never failed with any group I've ever played it with. The gist of Just One, like we've done it at your Birdie Fam reunions, and like non-gamers sit down and have a blast with this. So for those who haven't played Just One is essentially, we have if you're the starting player, you have a card that has 5 names, 5 words on it, but you can't see that. It's sitting in front of you, and you say number 5. Everyone else can see what that number 5 is, and like, for example, it's chocolate. So we all have these little dry erase little boards that every other person is going to write just one word on there for a clue, because you're trying to get that player to guess that word, chocolate. Now that player again doesn't know chocolate. When everyone's done, the player closes his eyes. Everyone who's wrote down a single word will show it to each other. So maybe you write down almonds, maybe you write down Hershey's, maybe you write down cocoa, different things like that. If more than one person, if multiple people have the same clue, then that clue doesn't get shown to that player. So you could have, if it's a 6-player game, you could have 2 people who have the same clue. They both put sweet, and everyone else put different things, so those go down. So now that player, me, who said who guessed chocolate, now is looking 3 clues to guess that word. But on the really fun times, you have multiple people have the same word, and then you have literally 1 clue. And it just becomes lots of laughs, lots of fun. The way we define things is like, what on earth was that? Why did you do that? And there's one word in the game is plier, but it's also spelled plie. So are you a dancer doing a plie, or you're a plumber using a plier? So with Christopher and Mandy, we have so many inside jokes from Just One. It is such a fantastic game. There is a scoring mechanism in it. We never score. We would put, okay, we got it right in one stack, we got it wrong in another. But I've never brought out Just One in which it wasn't a hit with pretty much everybody who sat down and did it. Not necessarily everybody sat down and do it, but it doesn't matter, young, old. The gist of the game is so fun. And you realize at first they're kind of leery, but then you just have fun with it. Because you're like, what is that word? I don't know. And then our most common joke is, I got the obvious one. Well, what is the obvious word? Yeah. Right? That's a joke between us and our fans. I have the obvious one, okay? And then I told you. And anyway, Just One is fantastic. And the other one, this is easy to find at a big box store. This is sold Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, so it's an easy one to get. And the other one I'm going to recommend is OG for sure, Ticket to Ride. We may cover Ticket to Ride one day, but I can't deny how great Ticket to Ride is. Settlers of Catan, Ticket to Ride were the 2 original ones that got me into it, and so many others. I don't play Settlers, but to this day, I will happily play Ticket to Ride. We did it on your last trip. I love Ticket to Ride Europe, Ticket to Ride Maryland, the 3 versions we have, and I still love Ticket to Ride to this day. Even the basics of the gameplay, it is so good. The set collection, the little bit of hate drafting, getting in people's ways, not knowing what people are doing. You have your private goals for the routes you're doing. There's so many good things, and the gameplay is just so easy. I'm taking tickets. I'm turning tickets in to put out trains. That's it, right? That's all you have to do in the entire game. Now, ideally, to do well in it, you got to strategize well on what route you're choosing to do. But the gameplay is, I take tickets, which are trains. I'm going to turn in these 3 black trains to put out 3 trains on this track for 3 black. So great. It's an OG. The app is fantastic for it as well. I've played that app a ton of times. But you can't go wrong with Ticket to Ride. It's such a great game, and it's an easy one to teach to newer players. What do you think about those games, Robbie?
Yeah, when you talk about that, it is so many inside jokes. Like, my wife and my friend Tyler, when we play, we pretty much, when they're at the table, we just know that we're not going to get either of their clues, because they'll be like, all right, I'm going to spin off. I'm going to go crazy on this one. And you're like, all right, cool. And then they both have the same word. I'm pretty confident they get dinner together or something at least once a week. That's the only way they can be on the same page that much. It's like, I agree. So many great conversations and inside jokes from it. Just One is, if I ever pack board games to take to a group, Just One just automatically goes in the box. And it's super small as well, so it travels really well. Great game.
You don't even need it in the box.
Ride.
You can take it. You can make it. You can make Just One smaller in that box. Put it in an envelope, or not envelope, but like a little Ziploc bag, and make it even smaller, right, for the travel capability of it. So yeah, absolutely.
And then Ticket to Ride, I completely agree. It is of the introductory of the big 3, and I'll pivot here in a second, but because I'm going to recommend one of the other big 3, because I think it honestly gets overlooked by a lot of people jumping into the hobby. And I think it teaches it's a really cool concept for a game. But Ticket to Ride is one that my in-laws, who are not gamers, and very much struggle to like, I already said it, like if it's too complicated, but the idea of it's very pretty. I can draw my train tickets, and Ticket to Ride is one of those. If I sit down, me, Jason, and Elizabeth play Ticket to Ride, there's not even really talking going down. We're just like, I'll take the blues. Okay. I'll take the white and the green. All right. Bang, 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 bang. And like, it's a well-oiled machine.
Yep.
And so for me, I could tell Jason and I are like birds of a feather, because when we played Ticket to Ride, he wanted to be the one putting the tickets back out, because it just gives you something to do while you're playing the game. When I play with my in-laws, like I have to be the one putting the tickets out, because if not, I get like stressed out or bored because they're thinking about their plays, and that's okay, because it is such a good introductory. And I agree, I will play Ticket to Ride any day. And Catan is one that, sure, like I will play Catan occasionally, but no, it's beautiful. For me, my two games, one that I think is a really good gateway is Monopoly Deal. So you have Monopoly, which is like this tried and true game experience. And so to me, the step into hobby gaming is what is beyond the games that I knew growing up. And so Monopoly Deal takes the concept of like owning and buying properties and whatnot and condenses it into a card game that is very easy to pick up, very simple, and has a lot of replayability. There are deal breakers. You're basically collecting properties and laying them down in sets. You can bank money off to the side. You charge rent to other players. So a lot of those elements still exist of classic Monopoly, but rather than being in a 4-hour stalemate of, I just keep dodging your properties and going around, it breaks really fast. We played with my in-laws this weekend, and it is a game that I recommended to them. I often gift Monopoly Deal to other people because it is very easy to play and really gets you going. It's a nice appetizer of a board game. And then the more strategy heavy one I would recommend is Carcassonne. And here's why I go Carcassonne, Jason. You can tell me if I'm way off base here. I love games where there is intricate strategy and simple strategy.
Yep.
So for the advanced player, you get into Carcassonne is a tile laying game where there are, it feels like 100 different tiles. And these tiles all have this, like a different piece of land on them. They may have a road. They may have a road that's shaped like a T. They may just have a straight road. Some of them have a castle or like a town or parts of a town. And so all of these tiles have different structures or landscape pieces on them, we'll say. So you are collectively, as the table, building a city or like a giant pasture. Like a kingdom, I guess would be the best way to describe it.
Yeah, you're basically building out because you're building a bunch of little castles essentially. So.
Yeah, so you're building these castles, and then you have these little meeples, which if you're like meeples are those little wooden people looking things. They look like gingerbread men. On my shirt if you're watching. But if you ever wonder like why are people so obsessed with gingerbread man, like those are meeples. They can come in a variety of shapes, but you have these little workers that you place around as you're placing those tiles to claim cities, to claim roads, and to claim farms. So whenever your structure that you're building is completed, let's say you're building a road, whenever it connects between two towns, that's the end of the road, and you pick your little meeple up, and boom, you get points for however long the road is. When you're building a city, once all the walls are closed in, you get points for that. So there's simple strategy that if you're just getting into the game, okay, I'll just place this down on this little road. Awesome. Like, that's super fun. Let me try to build a huge road. You can do that. You can play whatever game you want to play. But then there's farms. And if you ever really want to crush people in Carcassonne, farms are all of the grasslands between everything.
Yeah.
And so you claim these farms, and the strategy is you cannot claim a farm that someone else has already claimed. And your farms score based on how many completed cities reside inside of them. So usually what happens in Carcassonne is there's one massive farm that has so many cities inside of it. And so you are like, I'm looking at Jason, and he's already got 2 workers claiming that farm. So I'm going to throw this random green piece of grass out there that's not touching his farm right now, and then put a bunch of other pieces of grass connecting those tiles later on to try to get in on Jason's farm. And it's a really, really fun gameplay for the advanced gamer, but also very straightforward for a beginning gamer. Like, I remember the first time I got introduced to Carcassonne and watching someone play the farm strategy well and thinking to myself, all right, next time I play, that's me. Like,
yep.
I'm all in on the farms.
Yep. Yeah, we don't even – it's because that strategy is so great but so tough to comprehend, right? Because we don't even teach – we haven't taught Carcassonne in a while, but when we used to teach Carcassonne to new players, we would not even include the farmer because it just wouldn't make sense, right? It's hard to conceptualize everything you just said. And you explained it really well, but it's hard to conceptualize that on the board. You're like, wait a minute, why did you just get 32 points? Because you had all those farmers out there claiming all those completed cities or access because your farm is providing services to all those cities. So yeah, we don't even play with the farmers, but that's it. And you explain that well because you can. Carcassonne can be, okay, I'm just going to do a road, 2 points. I'm going to do a road, 4 points. Or I can try to go for this massive city and keep doing a corner of it and putting a little meeple there and another corner that hopefully will eventually connect. And now I have this humongous city. I like that. It's a good way to explain that. I love Carcassonne. We haven't played it in a while, but it's an OG for a reason. There's lots of other tile laying games that do different things to teach tile laying, but there's enough variety, like you explained in Carcassonne, to make it great. It's another one that had a good app. I've played it a ton on the app as well. And it has like a bajillion expansions. We've never really done many of the expansions because there's so many expansions. But Carcassonne is you can't go wrong because it teaches different concepts of board game, of the hobby board gaming life that we do in Carcassonne, between tile laying, between basically set collection, because you're kind of completing a set by completing that city. By a little push your luck with the farmers, right? Because you may put 3 farmers out and get squat because someone has 4 farmers out. Or you may never connect your farm to multiple completed cities. So it's a little bit of push your luck aspect as well, because once you put that farmer out, it's gone. He's not coming back in the game. So now you have one less asset to use the rest of that game if you don't complete that city, if you don't complete that road. So it's a little push your luck as well. So can't go wrong with Carcassonne. We had my friend Joey many years ago had sent us like a special box that was like in the shape of a meeple. After our mini moves from Europe to here and there, it got busted and broken apart. So I bought like a special edition of Carcassonne a while back, but it's still in shrink because we just haven't played it in a while. Not for any specific reason. I have 300 and something games. That's really the reason we haven't played it, because I have too many games as it is. But can't go wrong with that. I think those are both. I think all 4 of those games are good. Monopoly Deal, I had to go look it up on BGG when you were talking. I'm like, we've actually played that. We had friends in Germany who showed us how to do that. And it's actually, for what it's worth, on BGG, it's the highest rated Monopoly game I could find. It's over 6. BGG is Board Game Geek, the best website out there regarding board game related things. If you want to find something about a board game, go to boardgamegeek.com. There's a rating system people can put out there up 1 to 10. And so anything over 6 is a pretty good game. 7 and above is really good game, but the fact that Monopoly Deal is over 6 lets you know it's actually a good game that teaches you different things, and it's not that 4-hour slog fest that can be Monopoly. So I think all 4 of those games are definitely good starter ones for newer gamers.
Yeah, but hopefully as we dive through, we're gonna bring you more games and tell you what we love about the games, what do we not like, because I know that there's going to be games, and I'm excited for this because there have been very few games that I've played even with Jason that I've been like, yeah, I just don't like, that just wasn't it. Literally the only one that I can immediately go to is Calico, and it was simply because you're going to hear us use the word crunchy, and that because that's literally what your mind is doing while you're trying to process it, as it just feels like it's getting crunched over and over again as you're putting too much processing power into it. And once again, it wasn't like, oh, Calico's a bad game. It was literally the first game I ever played at the table with them, and I was like, okay, like, let's see, I'm a gamer, here we go. And they introduced me to that, and I was like, maybe I've never played a board game before in my life. So hopefully as we dive through the system, and I can guarantee we're going to end up with different cookie ratings. For Jason, it may be, he's going to see it as a peanut butter, and I'm going to think, man, I think this is maybe it's definitely a chocolate chip. It could be a double doozy depending on the day for me, because there are different preferences that we like and we lean into. And so you're always going to find, I know one thing right off the bat is that I play a lot of gotcha games. Like there is a gotcha element, and my crew that I've grown up playing with loves those type of games. And so I'm going to be curious as we come across some of the games, like if that influences how we rate the games.
Yeah, and we don't play a lot of those kind of games. We have played before, and we'll probably talk about some of those, King of Tokyo being one for sure. But Ryder's my youngest son. I say youngest, he's a sophomore in college. I'm an old man, but he's still my hardcore gamer, and we like deep strategy games. A lot of perfect information, everything's out there. Can I outthink you or outplay you on those? And I am egotistical and arrogant, and like we've talked about before, there are times I try strategies because I think I can win this game doing a totally different strategy. And Gaia games aren't bad. I come through phases of that, so that I agree with Robbie in that nature. There's some games we're going to see eye to eye and love them, and there's some like, oh, that's not quite for me, but I can see why it could be good for someone else. There's things about each of these games we're highlighting for newer players and brand new players that why, even though I may not like it because of this, that, or that, it could be perfect for you. Or I love this game and I know you're going to like, if you like this, push your luck, if you like rolling die, whatever that may be. That's kind of the journey we're going to have with these games, and hopefully introduce folks to new games and who want to try out the newer games, and even newer players like people we know, and try to introduce them to some more heavier games or things they haven't thought of that they may like. And Robbie may introduce me to some I may not have never played and that I'm going to like as well. So we're all on this journey together. Yeah.
And so I would say, as you listen to these, I look down and I'm like, oh man, Jason, we've been going for over an hour. Like this is why we don't get sleep when I come up to visit, and it's even more exciting when we're sitting there and Jason's describing a game to me, and we can literally just grab it, pull it off the wall, and he can show me the pieces, things like that. So there's so much to this. So y'all let us know in like the reviews. We would really appreciate on podcast platforms, wherever you're listening to this, leaving us a review, leaving us a comment, things of that nature. Just helps get this to more people faster for sure. We're diving into a new niche. So we want to make sure that, as we try to share this information, but let us know in the reviews, what's your ideal length for this, and we can try to bring it in close, get as close to that time, and still do justice to the games we're reviewing, because if Jason and I don't set a time limit for each other, this is going to get real long, and we want you guys to be able to enjoy them.
I know I'm going to have to work on based on that kind of feedback will help me gauge how much, because like we're over an hour and I could talk and talk and talk. I have to keep drinking water because my mouth is going dry because I'm talking so much. But for sure, let us know what makes sense, because I listen to some podcasts that are shorter and it's perfect, and I listen to some 2-hour podcasts and it could go longer. So we want to know what you guys want to hear. We thank you for those who have listened. The goal is to release these every 2 weeks. And we have a good plan for that, and I think we have plenty of games. Already have plenty of games lined up. Robbie's coming up in a few weeks, and so we'll have a couple games we'll kind of put in the back burner. We'll play then and talk on future episodes. So we have a good plan and a way ahead.
I love it.
I appreciate it,
Jason,
Robbie. I want to say thank you to Robbie. I even wore my Robbie C shirt because I'm very thankful that Robbie's taking this journey with me. It's perfect timing, and I almost took it off. I'm like, no, it's appropriate. I am a fanboy of my friend, which is an interesting thing, right? But I appreciate you helping me out and going on this journey, and it's going to be fun.
I am a part of multiple podcasts, and almost all of them I feel like I walk in with the vibe of an expert, and I am so grateful for Jason, because I am Jason's Padawan when it comes to learning board games. There are so many games that even as I've come up to visit, like we have not replayed pretty much any game since I've been up there, because he's still introducing me to so many that I just haven't had the chance to play. And so I am excited for this and excited for these discussions and excited to see more Bards of the Board fans as we get out there. And yeah, so thank you guys for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we'll see you at the table then. Take care.